I'm Vaughn Biggs, and this is Queer News Tonight Overtime. Let's queer up social justice. President Biden's final honor for LGBTQ hosts AIDS Quilt on White House lawn for World AIDS Day. Sunday, in honor of World AIDS Day, the AIDS Memorial Quilt made history by covering the White House South Lawn for the first time. Nearly 50,000 panels memorialized over 105,000 lives lost to AIDS, created a sweeping tribute to the resilience and grief of a generation. President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden led a moment of silence, joined by survivors, families, and advocates. The public later viewed the display during the garden tour-style open house. The White House also adorned its columns with a giant red ribbon to symbolize solidarity in the fight against HIV/AIDS. According to the statement by the White House spokesperson, quote, the AIDS Memorial Quilt, which began at the storefront in San Francisco at a time when victims did not receive funerals due to social stigma, is heading to the White House for the first time in history, end quote. Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, reflecting on the quilt's early days, shared how skepticism gave way to advocacy. In 1987, she fought for its display on the National Mall, transitioning it into a historic symbol of activism during a time of government inaction. Stewarded by the National AIDS Memorial, the quilt remains a living testament to those lost, with initiatives like Surviving Voices and scholarship nurturing new generations of advocates. In his World AIDS Day proclamation, Biden urged gratitude for those who have fought tirelessly against the epidemic, highlighting the nation's progress towards ending the new HIV transmission. On December 5th, there will be a symposium at the White House to address issues like mental health, housing, insecurity, and aging, emphasizing holistic care for people living with HIV. You know, I love World AIDS Day event. It's a great event for me. I like to attend because I like to hear the stories. And I feel like when he was able to hear those stories and give voices to people that don't normally get to speak. It was interesting in doing some research. You know, since HIV started, and HIV/AIDS, there have been over 88.4 million people diagnosed with HIV/AIDS, and we have lost over 44 million of them.
Wow.
So when people say, I didn't know this is still a thing, it is still a thing, and we hear it every day. I was just at an event and hearing these people that have, you know, they were born with HIV. So they've lived their entire life with HIV, and the stigma and everything that surrounds them when they talk about these stories, it's just so empowering. I'm just very happy to see that he did this. I mean, I love the AIDS Quilt. I think it's a great testament, and we need to continue to tell those stories.
I'm thrilled that he's recognized the LGBTQ plus community and, you know, the short amount of time that he's in office too. And, you know, because I don't think that we're going to be seeing, you know, this type of remembrance in the next 4 years, I don't think, from the White House. So it's good. It's a good reminder for us.
Well, hopefully we can encourage the continuity, though, with, you know, groups and organizations that are receptive, even if it's not at a federal level, at the various Pride celebrations, you know, celebrating the lives of, you know, people who are no longer with us, but celebrating those who've survived, you know, the pandemic of AIDS and are still with us.
Right.
You know, I'm always torn on this subject, and when World AIDS Day comes around, I've participated in so many different major events. Money seems to be at the heart of so much of what is focused on December 1 and World AIDS Day, sadly, to me. Vaughn, your observation to me just rings in terms of people's understanding, of young LGBT's understanding. They would never feel that way. They would never be ambivalent if they, like you, like probably all of us at this table, in 1986, go to the friend's house where there's 20 people standing around the bed just touching the person that's in the bed in the last hours of their life, when there was no hope of anything. And any recognition was all negative by the entire community. You would never think about HIV and AIDS the same if you went through that situation. And that's what the quilt represents. To me, the other thing that is super interesting on this story, we are forever. I said for years and years that Barack Obama was the greatest president for the LGBTQ community in history. And I changed that in 2024. The greatest LGBT president, the greatest president in support of the LGBTQ community in history is Joe Biden. And not only by a short distance, but by a country mile. Joe Biden has done more for our community in 4 years. It's just incredible. And this is one send-off moment of thousands of things that he has done for our community, and judges and recognition. And oh my goodness, we could spend hours on what Biden has done. The proof of that to me is what was done on World AIDS Day. The fence on the South Lawn, the first time the AIDS quilt is ever displayed on the property, the lawn of the White House, is 2024.
Yep.
40 years later. The quilt starts 36 years ago, I think, something along those lines. The first time ever is with Joe Biden in 2024 as he's getting ready to come out of office. I did an interview with Anthony Fauci, and we talked about so many different things. He was going through the stuff that he was going through with Donald Trump and lock him up and all of that nonsense. Fauci told a story that comes to mind as we do this story that says he became very good friends later in life of Larry Kramer of ACT UP. And Larry Kramer was one of the greatest anti-government establishment against AIDS voices in the history of the world. And Fauci tells me a story, Dr. Fauci, in respect, Dr. Fauci tells me a story that Kramer called him up one day and said, "You're not doing enough." I'm summarizing his words, but you personally are not doing enough. I'm on the inside. I have the president's voice. I have his ear. What do you mean I'm not doing enough? What is it you want me to do? And Kramer told Dr. Fauci, you should walk to the fence at the South Lawn and take handcuffs and handcuff yourself to the fence and say, until you do something more for HIV and AIDS, I'm not unhandcuffing myself off the fence of the South Lawn. In 2024, President Biden unveils panels for 105,000, largely gay men, but LGBTQ community. So he did exactly what Larry Kramer wanted Anthony Fauci to do, make a statement on that South Lawn, and he did it on World AIDS Day. How can we possibly be more thankful to the President of the United States?
This has been Queer News Tonight Overtime. There is no other LGBTQ nonprofit media platform like this in the world. Support our LGBTQ stories